To the UK now, where unemployment has hit a 40-year low. But inflation reached its highest level in nearly 4 years as a national election approaches. Consumer prices rose to an annual 2.7%, and they could increase again after a fall in the value of the pound and the recent rise in global oil prices. And wage growth fell behind inflation for the first time in 2.5 years. But despite that, Britain's unemployment rate fell to 4.6%. The figures highlight a potential slowdown of economic growth just as Prime Minister Theresa May heads into a general election. May says the vote is aimed at strengthening her hand in Britain's divorce negotiations with the European Union. Well, for more on the UK's economy, I'm joined by Iain Murray, Vice President of Strategy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute here in Washington. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be with you.
So give us an idea overall about the health of the UK economy right now.
Well, overall, I think the UK is in a pretty good spot. I think perhaps interest rates are going to have to go up with the knowledge that inflation is heading up again. But those unemployment figures are going to be a huge boost to Theresa May in both her negotiations with the European Union and with her campaign in the general election.
And obviously a lot of this hinging on what's happening with Brexit. We know that after decades of access to the EU single market, now the UK is in this position of having to renegotiate new trade deals, not only with the European Union, but the rest of the world as well. How well positioned is the UK to do that?
Well, I think the trouble is that the UK is in a prisoner's dilemma with the European Union at the moment. There's obviously room for a win-win, but both sides have incentives to harden their position. And unless they can realize that there is position for a win-win settlement, then there's going to be a problem. With the rest of the world, I think the UK is in a really good position. Lots of countries, especially the old Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and other countries like Korea and Chile are just lining up to do deals with the UK. And I think that's going to be a huge boost.
And give us a sense of the context. Just how vital are these trade deals to the UK's economy?
Well, the UK has always been a trading nation, always been an exporting nation. There are a lot of people who are suggesting in UK politics that the UK needs to turn back to being Little England. But I think if it does that, then its economy is going to really slow down and people will begin to suffer quite badly. It'll become the sick man of Europe again, exactly the position that it was in the 1960s and 70s that drove it into the European Union in the first place.
So you think it's unlikely that Britain will take a more protectionist stance?
I think in the end, especially if the European Union decides to play real hardball with the UK, then the UK is going to be forced to look out to the rest of the world for the best possible trade deals it can get. And as I say, I think it's in a good position to do that.
Now, obviously, the City of London is a financial hub, and we're seeing a lot of these multinational finance companies really mulling the idea of whether or not to remain headquartered in London. What does this do then for the financial jobs in the country?
Well, I think the main question is whether the UK will get passporting rights into the European Union. There's no real reason it shouldn't. There are countries like the Cayman Islands, the US, even Singapore, that have passporting rights in the European Union for their financial institutions. And at the moment, UK regulation is very similar to the European Union's. In fact, it's been driving much of the European Union's financial regulation. So I suspect that they will get passporting rights. If they don't, then it's a question of whether these companies really want to relocate to Paris or Frankfurt. As we know, London and Zurich are the two main financial capitals of Europe. Both are going to be outside the European Union. I suspect what we'll see is these companies opening up regional offices within the European Union, but remaining headquartered for a global financial industry in London.
Now, outside of finance, there's also other repercussions. A lot of people are wondering what's going to happen with innovation in the UK. Hire.co.uk says that the number of tech workers dropped 50% since the Brexit vote. The number of foreign workers accepting jobs from UK employers fell 20%. And even the job offers now that UK businesses are offering foreign workers has also fallen. How does uncertainty over what's going to happen with Brexit and implications for workers affect the overall jobs picture?
I think that's the biggest question at the moment. Theresa May has on a couple of occasions said that she wanted to guarantee reciprocal rights for workers, British workers in Europe, European workers in Britain, and that's been rejected by Angela Merkel, amongst others. I think that has to be the first question that is answered in the Brexit vote. The Brexit trade deals. That will give employers the certainty to start hiring again and getting the best talent from around the world.
And looking ahead to the general election, what is at stake for the UK economy and what could the potential consequences be when it comes to the bargaining position with Brexit should things go a little awry?
Well, the UK election is essentially now a two-party election. The Liberal Democrats looked as if they were going to come back, and all the polls suggest that their support is collapsing once again. So there's a choice between Theresa May's very centrist Conservative Party and Jeremy Corbyn's very hard left Marxist Labour Party. If Jeremy Corbyn gets elected, then he's promised renationalisation of industries, much higher tax rates, the sort of things that we were seeing from the British Labour Party in the 1970s and indeed the 1980s. And if that happens, then Britain's economy is going to be in a very precarious state indeed.
Certainly a lot of unknowns. Thank you so much for your insights. Iain Murray, Vice President for Strategy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute.